More than likely, you are a realist. Realism is a perspective, it's a worldview. Because you are a realist, you equate truth with common sense. You deal with things as they are. You value ideas and ideals by their practical application. You are big into results and outcomes. You consider yourself to be pragmatic. Realism is an outgrowth of American pragmatism, American know-how. If you're on a sailboat, a pessimist complains about the lack of wind. An optimist hopes that the wind will change, but you, because you are a realist, adjust the sails. Thomas, one of Jesus' disciples, is also a realist. Thomas is most often known as Doubting Thomas, but in my opinion, this is not correct. To me, Thomas is not as much a doubter as he is a realist. Thomas wants to know the truth straight up, and he relentlessly takes stock of a situation before making a decision. Thomas wasn't with these other disciples on Sunday night. We don't know where he was. Thomas, being a realist, was probably figuring out what was next and getting on with his life. He just didn't have time to be locked in a room, afraid. Thomas had a huge dose of reality on Friday. He had watched his friend and teacher as Jesus was nailed to 2 slabs of wood. On Friday, Jesus died on a cross. He was nothing but a corpse when he was taken down from the cross and laid in his tomb. So on Friday, all that Thomas knew was that God had not saved him and that dead people do not come back alive. Death is as real as it gets. It is Jesus who takes the initiative on Sunday evening. The frightened disciples, locked away in a room, are found out by Jesus. The fear and closed doors are not barriers for Jesus. He overcomes all human obstacles. No stone can shut him in. No door can keep him out. Suddenly, he is standing there in the midst of his disciples. When the other disciples come and tell Thomas, "We have seen the Lord," Thomas doesn't merely doubt. Thomas, out and out, does not believe them. They have seen Jesus, Thomas has not. Thomas is a realist. He needs evidence. He needs data. He needs to see what the other disciples saw. He's not asking for anything more, but he's certainly not asking for anything less. Thomas demands verification. Thomas needs to see the hands. Thomas needs to touch the hands. Thomas needs to see his side. Thomas needs to touch his side. As realists, we may have a particular sympathy for Thomas. We've all been taught that learning starts with skepticism. We've all been taught the value of evidence and data. We've all been taught about patterns and how things normally work in the world. Jesus, however, doesn't buy into everything that we've been taught. Jesus is not a mere object for detached analysis or dispassionate evaluation. Remember, it's Jesus who takes the initiative. Jesus decides when, where, and how he'll show up. A week later, We are told the disciples have gathered in the same room. This time Thomas is there, the doors are shut. And Jesus came and appeared among them. Again, Jesus takes the initiative. He turns to Thomas, speaks directly to him. Put your finger here in the mark of the nails. See my hands. Reach out your hand. Put it in my side. Do not doubt, but believe. This is where we get the phrase, doubting Thomas. The problem is, that's not quite an accurate translation of what Jesus actually said. Jesus really doesn't say, do not doubt. To doubt implies that there's some kind of gray area. To doubt is to imply that you can list the pros and the cons and then make a decision. To doubt means you're trying to figure it out, but you're not quite there. What Jesus actually says is turn from unbelieving to believing. Unbelieving is not buying any of it. Unbelieving is not trying to figure it out. Unbelieving is not saying there's a gray area. Believing is the opposite. Believing is buying in totally. Believing is taking the leap. Believing is an act of faith and trust as much as it is an act of weighing the evidence. This is the most well-known depiction of doubting Thomas, and it's a little washed out with the lights still on. But what you see here is Thomas placing his finger in Jesus' side. This is from the Italian artist of the Renaissance, Caravaggio. And what you can see is Thomas's eyes directed right onto the wounds and the eyes of these other disciples here. Very, very important to get the message of this painting, that it is the Christ who had died and has been raised again. The Christ who was dead, who is now alive. You can tell by the wounds. My Lord and my God is Thomas's reaction. Thomas's realism had been too small. Thomas's realism had been too limited. Thomas's pragmatism had prevented him from seeing what God can do. As Thomas encounters the risen Christ, as he puts his finger in Jesus' side, Thomas's understanding of what is real enlarges. Now Thomas can see that resurrection can really happen. Now Thomas has a sense that the impossible is possible. Now Thomas begins to grasp that God really is alive and active and taking action right now. Now Thomas knows that death is not the final reality. Jesus is raised, and Thomas is invited into a deeper, more encompassing realism that includes a dynamic and powerful understanding of God at work in the world and even in his own life. And this is what speaks to realists like you and me. We live in a time where believing in God has just become one of the options. Nobody cares that much whether we believe in God or not, as long as we keep it private, as long as it's not something we intrude with in other people's lives, as long as we're quiet about it. we kind of adopt the realism of our day and compartmentalize our understanding of God in a locked room where nobody can see it and nobody can get in, through a door that we sometimes unlock and open and sometimes don't. Easter challenges our realism in two ways. The empty tomb challenges our realism. Last week we followed the women to Jesus' tomb. When they arrived, they were surprised and shocked to find that the stone that covered the entrance had been rolled away and the tomb was empty. They were afraid that Jesus' body had been stolen. Angels told them differently. He is not here. He has been raised. Easter confronts us with this empty tomb. But the big deal isn't where Jesus was not. The big deal is where Jesus was. Easter also challenges us with these resurrection appearances to Thomas and to others, challenging their realism. After he was raised, Jesus appears to Mary and to other women. And what did he say to them? He said, "Do not be afraid." And he appeared to Peter, who had denied him 3 times and was awash in guilt. And the risen Christ restored him. He appeared to his disciples, who were cowering in a locked room, and he empowered them. He appeared to 2 other disciples on the Emmaus Road, and he taught them. Later, he appeared to the Apostle Paul and knocked him off a horse and called him to share the good news, especially with Gentiles. But before all that, he appeared to Thomas and expanded his realism. The empty tomb and Jesus' appearance to many, including Thomas, tell us that our realism is too small, it is too limited, and it doesn't include the presence of God. There are people in the world today, this very day, who have been warned that it's too dangerous to go to church today. They went to church last week on Easter, and they were attacked, and hundreds were killed. It happened in Sri Lanka. And they were warned today, don't go. You're taking a chance. It's too dangerous. And some won't. But others will. Because they know that's where the risen Christ is. And when Christ appears, your realism is challenged and it expands. And you know that you're not alone, and you know that God is active and alive and taking action in the world, and you know that death is not the final word. And you know that even if they kill you, they just have your dead body. Something else is on the horizon. Something else is stronger. Something else means more. Your faith and trust in this one who is risen from the dead. What business is Jesus in? He is in the resurrection business. He continues to take the initiative and come to us and come to everyone else gathered in his name. The risen Christ overcomes all human obstacles, even threat of violence, and appears in the midst of our lives. He is not an object of inquiry. He does not come to just encourage us to believe that something happened. He comes to establish a relationship of loving trust and faithful discipleship with us. He comes to enlarge our realism. He comes to expand our realism. he comes to extend our realism so that we will know that even miracles are possible. Here's a quote from David Dyer's brother Wayne. "I am a realist. I expect miracles." And that's it. To be a realist is not to diminish what God can do. To be a realist is to trust what God has shown us that he can do.